Hey there, it's Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you my March wrap-up where I'll be talking about all of the books that I read in March. If you would like content warnings for any of these books, I'll have them in the description box down below, but without further ado, let's get right down to the books. So I was very curious about books that are trending on TikTok, so I thought I would read one, and I read It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. This is an adult fiction book that talks about relationships. So the synopsis of this one describes Lily as a main character who's not had an easy life, but when she meets Ryle, she thinks that maybe she can leave her past behind her and enjoy this relationship. But Atlas, who is someone from her past, suddenly shows up again, and it threatens to throw everything that she has with Ryle in peril. And I don't think that synopsis quite covers everything that this book has. There's a major trigger warning, which I am going to leave at the front of the content warnings in the description box down below. It'll be the very first one there. Major content warning for that. But the one thing I do have to say is if you are going into this book looking for a romance and looking for a love triangle, you will get the love triangle aspect, but you are not going to get a romance. This does not read like a romance book to me. And personally, I didn't get along with this book and I didn't really like it. My main issue with the book, and where I feel like this book really falls flat, is in the first few chapters. Lily meets Ryle, and just like that, she fancies him, she falls for him. She doesn't know anything about his personality, she doesn't know anything about him as a human being. They just look at each other and feel an instant sexual tension and attraction, which is fine for some people, but for me, if you want me to not even root for a romance, but believe in the romantic feelings that they have for each other, they do need to build off of more than that for me. So because it was lacking that, I could not get behind these characters. I don't think the writing is bad per se, but it's not really anything that drew me in or intrigued me. And this one also has some steamy scenes, but they were not good. They were not well written to me. They were very flat and I just wasn't feeling it. While I was reading this book, I was gradually getting progressively more angry, and I think that is exactly where the author wanted me to be as I was reading. And as I got angrier, I started to read this book faster because I needed to know the outcome. The choice that is made at the end of this book was really the make or break of whether this was going to be a good book or a bad book for me, and I have to say I am satisfied with the way that it ended. That said, I think the way it ended introduces a stereotype which I think is incredibly harmful in the light of the topics that are discussed. I cannot tell you what this harmful stereotype is without spoiling this whole book. Feel free to ask me in the comments if you've read the book and want to know, but I do think this book falls into some stereotypical tropes and issues around this topic that are very bad, and I'm not very supportive of them. It just wasn't a book for me. I just often didn't get behind the characters, didn't really feel as emotionally invested in the story as I wanted to. It was a really weird experience where at the end I couldn't decide whether I'd liked the book or if I hadn't, because I was focused so much on the subject matter and my feelings around the subject matter. I don't particularly think I'm going to be reading any more Colleen Hoover books after this one. But that said, then we move on to On the Come Up by Angie, and I absolutely loved this book and it became a new favourite. I don't know why it took me so long for me to pick up this book. In this book, we follow Bree, who wants to be a rapper. She wants to be on the come up and she's getting some big breaks, which is very exciting for her. However, she also has some things holding her back. There seems to be some discrimination going on with the students at her school. She is really struggling with poverty and how that is affecting her family and her relationships around her. And as well as that, she's just a teenager with all these teenage feelings, and her friend group are all changing. I just thought this was spectacularly well done. Angie Thomas has a way of touching on a lot of subjects and a lot of themes and balancing them all incredibly well. She talks about feminism in this book. She talks about complex family dynamics and relationships. We get to see teenagers being teenagers and having those fluttery first feelings for someone, but feeling confused and not knowing where to go, what to do with these feelings. All of the friends in her friendship group are changing, and whether they can still fit together as friends after these changes are done is yet to be seen, and that feeling of uncertainty is difficult for her. In this one, Angie Thomas looks at over-policing certain neighbourhoods and discrimination and racism that people are facing, as well as the fact that the poverty circle is very trapping. Even when you're trying to break yourself out of it, there are rules and things in place which means only certain people will really be able to break out of those boundaries. And the way that she touches on all of this and balances it is absolutely fantastic to me. I always love a complex family dynamic, so I personally was very attuned to that. But one thing about me is that I love rap music, and I don't think I read that many books that look at that and examine that and focus on that. I loved seeing all the raps that were written down in this book, and I wish that I could reread this book as an audiobook, because I feel like hearing someone rap those raps, those lines, will be really, really cool. But I also like how it not only praises and celebrates rap music and rap history and what that means for Black culture, it also looks at some of the pitfalls and not so great things about rap, in terms of the way that male rappers are more lauded and treated better than female rappers, and female rappers are expected to talk about certain things whereas male rappers can talk about others. It addresses some of the sexism and separation that there seems to be in the industry, but it also talks about the actual content of rap and what that can mean and the front that some people tend to put on. It's all here, it's all in this book, and even though those are a lot of things to talk about and discuss, Angie Thomas does it easily. I was sold on all of her characters and I whizzed through this book. I did not want to stop reading. We're back at it again with poetry. So I read this collection, Bless the Daughter Raised by a Voice in Her Head, which is by Warsan Shire. Warsan Shire is the poet who wrote the poetry that is spoken on Beyonce's Lemonade album and also spoken on Black is King, which is why I was very much anticipating her first published poetry collection, and she knocked it out of the park. I gave this 5 stars and I thought this was brilliant, an absolute new favourite. So in this poetry collection, it's really talking about themes of motherhood, but also some themes of religion and also refugees. There was a lot of talk about refugees in this one, which took me by surprise, but I was very happy and satisfied with how all of it was dealt with. Of course, there's stuff about relationships and femininity and racism. It's just all incorporated in this, and I loved how, as a poetry collection as a whole, you can really see that it's about independence and the struggle that some Black women who are religious have to face. There's a lot of Muslim religious imagery and themes in this, and it's just about having to grow yourself up and what it's like as a woman doing that. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. The imagery and the sentence construction, the way that these poems were pieced together and fit together, you can tell that every single word was very carefully chosen to paint the overall bigger picture of a poem. And it felt like unraveling a puzzle as I was reading this, as I was working my way through it. And I just wanted to keep on reading, even though I tend to read poetry slower. It was just something I could savor. It was the kind of poetry where I could see the images, I could savor the words, I could taste them on the tip of my tongue. And I always felt the emotion that each poem was trying to emit and send to me. I received it. I felt those emotions. I felt like I was wrapped up in a cocoon of her words. And that is why this poetry collection is fantastic. And if you like poetry, this is definitely one you've got to read. I then read This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay. This is a non-fiction diary style written memoir about a junior doctor's experience working as a junior doctor in the NHS. It was very interesting and a very enlightening read. I learned a lot from it. I had overall a good time with this memoir. I liked it in the end. I thought it was fascinating to just learn more about how the NHS works. It did a good job of showing the balance between how good the NHS is, how blessed we are to have the NHS, and all the ways in which the NHS is really providing for people and how much it is a needed, required service, while also talking about the way how there is a shortage of doctors and nurses and how they're all stressed and how they're not getting enough support in terms of mental health for all of the things they have to do and face, but also in terms of getting holidays, getting breaks, having somebody really looking at the ways in which their job, their shifts are set out and laid out so everyone has enough time. There needs to be more administrative work support as well. And I liked that it showed both the benefits and the pitfalls fairly well and balanced it. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. but there was some humour in this, and while at times the humour did get to me, the humour made me smile, the humour made me laugh, and I thought this is a fun and enjoyable way to talk about such a serious topic, because in a lot of these cases they're very serious medical conditions. At other times the jokes just fell completely flat, and I just thought that's not even funny, that's just a bit mean. And while I was reading this memoir, this is the first time it's happened, I was reading a memoir and I got the strong impression that if I'd met Adam Kay, me and Adam Kay, we wouldn't be friends. I don't think we would be friends. And it did impact my reading experience. And while I tried to not let that impact my rating, I do get the personal opinion that Adam Kay is not really the person for me, and I think sometimes he was a bit rude and sometimes he was a bit mean, and that was just an interesting feeling to get from reading this memoir. There was one joke in here, this one section that I really didn't like, where he didn't respect someone's religious beliefs, and I do understand that the Jehovah Witness religion, in terms of how people work and what they need to do in medicine for someone's health and healing, there is some clashes because of blood transfusion. I do understand that, and I can respect his thoughts in that regard, but then he was talking about a entirely different medical related element of their religion, and he was just like, that's just silly. And I thought, I don't like that. I don't like when people don't respect other people's religious beliefs and choices when they're different to your own. So there were certain places where I was just like, I'm not really a big fan of this book, I don't think I like it, and it's all personal opinion. But yeah, that was my interesting wild ride reading this one. Overall, I would recommend it. I think there's a lot people can take away and learn about the British medical systems and treatments in this one, but at the same time, I don't think I need to read any more Adam Kay books. Then I read Since You've Been Gone by Morgan Matson. I've just been enjoying reading Morgan Matson's contemporary books. I find them middle of the road, I find them mediocre, but they satisfy something in my heart. They do something for me that other books are not doing. These are exactly the kind of books that I would have picked up as a teenager, so I get a nostalgic vibe to them even though I haven't ever read them before. And in this one, we're following our main character who is best friends with Sloane, this girl that she thinks is so cool, and she follows her around and she does everything that Sloane wants to do. And then one day she goes to Sloane's house and it's empty. She's completely gone. She has no clue what her best friend is up to or where her best friend has gone. But what is left behind is a bucket list of things that she is very afraid to do. And she thinks that if she follows this bucket list throughout the summer and gets to the end of it, maybe she'll be able to figure out where her best friend is or what happened to her best friend. And that's what this book is. It's a bucket list, young adult contemporary with summer vibes, and it was cute and it was sweet, and from the first few pages you kind of know exactly where the book is going to go, and you just enjoy being in that very comfortable journey of getting to the end of the book and everything ending exactly the way you want it to, exactly the way you thought it was, and it's nice. I do think that in the beginning I was a bit frustrated with our main character because she's all like, Sloane would have done this and Sloane that and Sloane, and I just wanted our main character to get a life and do her own thing. But as you read the book, the main character does get a life and do her own thing, and it was just lovely to see that character development happening. There were certain ways in which this book did surprise me because I thought the character development would lead to a certain kind of ending, and it did not, and I kind of appreciated that this book still managed to bring something a bit new to the table that I was not expecting, and it was just really nice. I am someone who likes to see very good and detailed character development, and this book brings that, it gives me that, so I enjoyed that. I like when a book balances not only romantic relationships but also friendships, and this book again does that and gives me that. So even though I wouldn't say that Since You've Been Gone is a earth-shaking must read, if you want something comforting, if you want something good vibes only, if you want something that's going to make you feel happy during the summer, I would definitely recommend this. We are back at it again with reading the oldest books on my TBR. So I read The Shack by W.M. Paul Young, and this book surprised me. It was not what I was expecting. When I first talked about this, I said it was a thriller. It is indeed not a thriller, so don't go in with that expectation whatsoever. It's a book about a man who goes through something really horrible and he does not feel happy with God, and he's kind of turned away from God and turned away from those emotions, and then he goes to a shack in the middle of nowhere where a significantly painful thing has happened to him, and he has this discussion with God and this experience with God that really changes his point of view. And this book surprised me. It just surprised me and kept surprising me. In the beginning, you get to hear about a situation that's incredibly heartbreaking and stressful, and it almost reads like a thriller for the first third as you're going through that. And I was absolutely racing through this one, and I couldn't stop reading, and it was devastating but also very addictive in a certain way. But then it got to the more religious part, and it surprised me. I did think this was going to be a stereotypical portrayal of religion that I've seen time and time again, which excludes people that look like me in terms of women and in terms of a black person who believes. And it didn't do that. It managed to have a much more open-ended view on religion than I expected, and I was pleasantly surprised. But what it did do is that it fell into reading a bit like a sermon, and I go to church, I hear sermons, I don't really need to read them in a book per se. So I feel like it lost me a little bit there, where it just felt like it became a sermon rather than a book where I was going to get a lot from it. It just felt like it lost me a little bit. It didn't have me addicted to it the way that the first third did. And while I don't think this is a bad book by any means, it's just not my personal kind of book. So it was nice, it was well written, I just thought it was fine. We have the second poetry collection I finished last month, and that is Woman Eat Me Whole by Asantewa, Diaka, and this was my most anticipated poetry collection of this year. I love the title, Woman Eat Me Whole, and I really like that the poetry collection is laid out in sections, and the first section is woman, the second section is eat, and then the third section is me, and the last section is whole. And I think that was very clever, and as you can tell, that is what each section is about. The first one really focuses on womanhood, and throughout the poetry collection in total, it does talk about womanhood, it does talk about independence and being yourself, it does talk about what it means to be wholesome and complete and feel free. It talks about the definition of home and culture and the black experience, of course, and it kind of touches on all of those things. In this collection, I did have some poems I enjoyed more than others, whereas in the Warsan Shire, each and every single poem was a favourite. It didn't miss, none of them missed. This one, I think there were some that I felt were okay, they weren't bad, but they were just okay, and there were others that I really, really liked and had fun reading and unspooling and unpacking. There's a really good use of the space on the page in this collection. There's also some really nice images thrown in there here and there, and I like the way that it played with rhyme in some certain poems and played a lot with rhythm. So I will say that this is a very good poetry collection, and I really recommend it. And personally, I feel like it suffers a bit from falling into the shadow of the Warsan Shire, but independently and standing on its own, this is a very good poetry collection, and I really enjoyed it. This book includes The Call of the Wild and White Fang by Jack London, and I just read The Call of the Wild by Jack London. I don't have much to say about this book. If I'd given myself 5 minutes to look at the back of the book before picking it up, rather than just reading it solely based on a friend's recommendation, I would have known that this is not the classic for me, because it's a book all about an animal, and I don't do well with animal points of view or where a book is entirely about an animal. So that's just on me not checking out this book in enough detail. It's only 80 pages long, so I just raced through it in one morning and finished it, and that was that, and it was just a book that I read. If I had to tell you about this one, I would describe it as this wild dog gets taken in by an owner, and this owner is involved in the gold rush, and it's about the relationship the dog has to the other dogs pulling their sled, but also to the owner, and also wanting to be wild and free because he is originally a wild dog. I really don't have anything to say. It was just something that I read, and that is that, and I will not be reading anymore in this series. I will not read the sequel because the first one just wasn't for me. I also finished reading the Bridesmaid Survival Guide by Hannah O'Donnell, which is our very own booktube, Hannah from Ladette M. And this is a young adult contemporary book all about a girl who is going to be a bridesmaid for her aunt's wedding, and she's trying to survive being a bridesmaid, but at the same time her boyfriend and their relationship is thrown into a bit of an upset, and we're seeing how she's going to be processing that, and she's also just trying to get through secondary school. And I enjoyed this one a lot. I think it did a very good job of capturing what it's like to be a teenager. I really liked seeing the relationship that she has to both her aunt and her mum and her family, and just seeing those really nice interactions. The friendship group was always very supportive of her, and I love seeing that female friendship solidarity. But also I think the romance and the relationship that formed in this one was really sweet and really cute. I have to say though, my favourite thing about the book is the fat girl representation. Our main character is fat, and you get to hear about some of the experiences that she has with that, not only in some of the humiliations and things that other people say, but also just how she goes about her everyday life. I found that very interesting, and I thought that representation was really, really good. My favourite thing about the book though, even though that representation was great, was definitely the ending. If you don't know this about me, I love a good wedding scene. As an INFJ, we just soak up all the happiness in weddings, and we feel like a happy bubble ready to explode with love and joy and friendship and all of the good vibes you get at weddings. And I get those same feelings when I read a book that has a very nice wedding in it. So by the end, I just felt full of happiness and joy, and I was grinning and smiling, and it was just really, really nice. I enjoyed this book. You should go and read it if you like young adult contemporary. I also read The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. If you couldn't tell, I was trying to see how I was feeling with delving into Christian fiction a bit more. And just like The Shack, I don't think this was particularly the one for me. It's a very metaphorical kind of novel. So we've got the Pilgrim, who is our main character, and he is going on a difficult journey to get to a promised land. And along the way, he meets characters like hope, like ignorance, like perseverance, like judgment. He meets characters that are called those things. So you can very much see how his interactions with those are gonna be part of a larger moral message. And while I was reading the introduction to this book, I was really enjoying it because it was told all in verse and it was rhyming, and I was very impressed. And I was like, if this is the way the whole book is going to be, I'm going to have a jolly good time. But then the first chapter started and it turned into prose, and then because the introduction was so good, I think it lost me a little bit there and never quite managed to pick me back up again. So it was a fine read. I got my way through it and it was good, but it's just not the book for me. And I think I've done a good job of delving into Christian fiction and just dipping my toes in it and seeing where I fall. So I might not be reading any more very soon, but I did that. I gave it a go. Last but not least, I read Little Murders by Jules Feiffer, and this is a play that I had a very good time with, but also I've got some reservations. So in this play, it's set in this world where there's always murders happening on the street. There's like 9 murders happening every single day, and it all takes place within this house where we are with 4 characters and also a partner. So there's the mom, there's the dad, there's the sister and the brother, and the sister has a partner. She's kind of introducing someone new to her parents into this house and this life that they've lived as a nice little bubble, trying to stay indoors as much as possible to avoid the murders that are happening outside. I love good existentialism play. I just love the themes of nihilism and the themes of existentialism. I love it. I just can't get enough of it, and I find it interesting how all of these different playwrights who write within this genre tackle it and delve into those themes and topics. What I really liked about this one is how the characterization fueled those themes. We kind of see these characters being the most stereotypical, aggressive version of themselves. We've got the dad, who is very aggressively masculine and angry all the time and doesn't want to let this man encroach on his daughter. We've got this mother who feels like everything she does is never enough, and she sacrifices so much for her children and so much of her happiness. Then we've got the brother who's a bit silly and he's all like having fun all the time and not taking anything seriously. And we've got a sister who has a major hero complex and feels like she needs to save everybody and rescue everybody, and you know, strong woman vibes, got to carry everything. And then the partner is, well, a bit emotionally distant and in need of saving. And it was interesting to see these characters present themselves in the way that they did, but also at sometimes have to present the exact reverse of themselves because of where the story goes. And I just found that absolutely fascinating. And the back and forth and the dialogue that happened in this play also includes quite a bit of humour that had me smiling and laughing, because it was just so funny the way it all fit together. And I thought it did a good job of balancing the characters and the themes and setting it within this nuclear setting of a house, while we know that the outside world is so dangerous. And there is some commentary that is threaded through this one on the criminal justice system and getting away with murder, and what does it mean to murder someone, both literally and also metaphorically. And it was just such an interesting play in quite a short amount of pages, and it packed it all in and it did it all incredibly well. But there is quite a bit of homophobia in this play, and it's homophobia in the way where I can't distinguish if it's commentary and that's why it's included, or if it's just homophobia that's awful. And personally, when I was reading it, I didn't get enough commentary on the way that homophobia was included, that it felt more so like homophobia just being in the book, and it kind of not really being something serving the storyline, but something that the author put in. And I can't say that that's what the author intended or not, I can't be sure. And I did do a little bit of research, but it was really hard to wade through and I didn't get any concrete answers. But that's what made me uncomfortable about the play. So even though I liked it, it stopped me from loving it, because I couldn't fully give myself over to it because there was that feeling of distance. So there we have it. Those are my thoughts on all of the books that I read last month. Please let me know in the comment section down below what was your favourite read of last month. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more. And don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior! And then last but not least, I read a play, and that is Little Mermaids. I keep calling it Little Mermaids because I love the Little Mermaid, but it's not Little Mermaid, it's Little Murders. Okay, no Little Mermaid, murder, think murder. So the last but not least, I read Little Mermaid.